And we're live. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome. Hey, family. Welcome back to another Becoming Supernatural live. If you're new here, I'm Brittany. Hey, your manifesting mentor. I'm not a coach, I'm not a guru, but I'm a woman who walks the walk and who shares what works. So every week we break down Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza, chapter by chapter, and I offer my personal reflections, real life demonstrations, and guidance to help you apply these teachings in everyday life. So it looks like the same issue I have from time to time. I'm going to step away for a second and see if I can improve my signal so that we're not jumping all over the place the entire live. 1 second, y'all. See if that's any better. I don't know, but we're gonna keep it going anyway. I'm gonna just keep it going. Oh, it looks like it's improving. We'll keep it going. So we're diving into chapter 12 tonight, and it's a powerful one, y'all. It's the pineal gland, and you've probably seen my TikTok videos, my videos here on YouTube about it. But parts 1 through 3 lay the groundwork for us to understand how the inner biology was always designed for transcendence. This chapter really shifts the conversation from theory to mystical activation. So let's get into it. Part 1 is the introduction to the pineal gland, which is, and also melatonin, which is the dreaming neurotransmitter. So Dr. Joe starts by explaining how ancient mystics referred to the pineal gland as the third eye. I call it the pineal gland. Some people say pineal gland, whatever. Tomatoes, tomatoes. Y'all know what I'm talking about. But they refer to it as the third eye. And it's a concept rooted in the belief that this tiny gland that's located in the center of our skull allows us to perceive beyond physical reality. So he introduces melatonin, which you may know as the sleeping hormone, right? But it's not just the sleeping hormone. He introduces it because he calls it a neurotransmitter of the mystical. It allows us to have these mystical experiences in meditation. So when we're in total darkness, for example, our eyes allow certain natural light to come in, and that signals the body to produce the melatonin. When the light is going down outside, obviously when the sun's going down, and it tells our body to relax. We're getting ready for sleep or rest, like a bear when it's hibernating, right? And when it's time to wake up, the light comes in, hits our eyes, and it tells our bodies, hey, it's time to get up. So serotonin is produced, and that tells you wake up now. So what he says is when we're in total darkness and calm brainwave states, which is alpha and theta, melatonin is produced and it becomes the biological gateway to other dimensions. Really cool stuff. We'll get more into that in part 3. But someone wanted to know, why is melatonin so important for mystical states? So, as I was mentioning, when your body is super duper relaxed, which is what we aim for when we're doing these meditations, no matter which meditation you do, you want to override the analytical mind. You want to get beyond your body. That's the whole premise of Dr. Joe and all of his teachings, all of the meditations, is that when you're learning about manifestation, you'll run up against yourself. You'll run up against your resistance, your limited beliefs. You'll run up against the limited emotions that you've been practicing and storing in your body unconsciously. And most of us come into the teachings of Neville Goddard when that happens, when law of assumption or law of attraction, you run into a roadblock with law of attraction and Abraham Hicks. So you come into the law of assumption, but you practice that enough, you'll still recognize some of your limitations. And then you find Dr. Joe, and he tells you, wait, your body is the actual gateway, and you have to overcome or get beyond your analytical mind and get beyond those limited beliefs, those limited emotions that you've been practicing, because they are of the old man. As Neville said, they are of the past, and we're addicted to them. And so once Dr. Joe gives the framework for how these bodies work and how we need to just overcome our bodies and teach it something new so that we don't continue to live in the patterns of the frequencies of the old thoughts and the old emotions and stop recreating from that pattern. When we learn these things, we understand that we can overcome the body. So, part of what we're learning in chapter 12 is because that melatonin is important because it quiets the neocortex, which is the thinking part of the brain, the thinking and analytical part of your brain. So, that melatonin producing in your body calms the mind down, calms the brain down, and tells it, hey, shh, you're safe. We can create now. And that's what you want. So it increases inner awareness when you're able to quiet the analytical part of your thinking mind, and it allows you to receive visions, insights, and a deeper spiritual connection. And someone wanted to know, is it the is it the same melatonin that you buy in the stores? And my answer is no. What Dr. Joe explains in chapter 12 is that we're not just talking about the traditional sleeping hormone that your body produces. He walks us through a process of activating the pineal gland. So, after he introduces what the pineal gland is, he walks us through the process of what we need to do to activate it. And if you're familiar with his work, he talks about the breath. This is one of his most intense teachings, and the people who have the courage and guts to practice it, and I've become one of those people. But when you have the guts and courage to practice it and the consistency, you start to understand what you're doing with your body. So we talk about melatonin because when we do the breath, what we're doing is we're pulling cerebral fluid from our spine all the way up the spine, and we're trying to create an internal pressurized effect that pushes the fluid up the spine into the brain to strike up against the pineal gland. And the reason he said we want to do this is because the pineal gland has these citrate crystals around it. And when that cerebral fluid, which has other chemicals in it, like sodium dioxide or something like that, but when those chemicals interact, there is chemistry that happens. And so that melatonin gets produced, but it gets supercharged with this electromagnetic experience that happens because when the crystals in your pineal gland strike up against the cerebral fluid, it creates an electromagnetic charge. So this is why when we always say things like we're electromagnetic beings, this is why. Not only can you experience static electricity when you touch someone and they shock you, but your pineal gland has crystals around it. And when you do this breath and you practice this breath, you're able to create your own intentional electromagnetic charge. And he says that he compares it to like a torus field. So if you've ever Google torus field, but I would like to compare it to like an apple. If you ever seen an apple, and it has like its center at the top, and then it's round all the way to the core at the bottom. So what he says is it's like this field from the center going from the top and around all the way through the bottom. But imagine that infinitely 360 all around the apple. This is what you're creating with your electromagnetic field. When you do this breath and you activate the pineal gland, you're creating a torus field around your entire body. But it's not just going one way, it's pulsating back and forth. So now you're becoming like a magnet. And if this sounds fascinating, that listen, I told y'all this was the best chapter in the book. And it's for a reason because it literally demystifies all the things we've learned spiritually from different ancient spiritual practices and rituals. This book is really bringing the science to light, and it's helping us to understand. Dr. Joe says knowledge is the precursor to experience. So the more you understand something, the more intentional you can be as you're experiencing something to really get more bang for your buck, to really understand what you're doing and to really hit your target. And so, no, to the person's question, this isn't melatonin as we know it. What's happening is the chemicals that are being created with this electromagnetic charge, when it comes in contact with the melatonin, produces multiple derivatives that he calls supercharged melatonin. And what this has is anti-cancer properties, anti-inflammatory properties, anti-degenerative properties, anti-stroke properties. This is literally how people in Dr. Joe's community are healing from the incurable, are healing from chronic issues. This is how. And no, not everybody does the pineal gland meditation, which we're going to learn about on Friday when we go over part 4 and 5. But people who do the breath and meditation, especially when they go to his workshops, they do report having mystical experiences. And so, as we go into part 2, where he teaches more about how to activate the pineal gland, and he says that the pineal gland, um, he says the key is the breath work, but as we go into activating it, it creates an inductance field, and it's a measurable electromagnetic field. And this is what we're actually doing. We're trying to replicate the experience that people have when they're having psychedelic experiences from like shrooms or DMT. What he says is that we actually produce our own DMT. That melatonin gets converted into supercharged melatonin, and now it's doing more than any pharmaceutical drug on the market could possibly potentially do. And what's so crazy is that your body has its own intelligence. It knows exactly what to do with the chemicals that it produces from within. So yeah, I know. If this is resonating with you, put some heart emojis, some fire emojis, something to let me know that this is resonating with you. And even if you didn't watch my readings of parts 1 through 3, you can always go back. My intention here is to archive this information because when you start to do this work, you're going to want to revisit the basics. Even Dr. Joe has to go back to the basics, and he teaches this stuff. So, to evolve your practice, to evolve your knowledge, come back to the basics. And every time you pick up the book or every time you listen to my readings and we reflect, you might even drop some new comments because every time you read it, you're going to have a deeper understanding of this work as you develop your practice. So, someone says, how does the breath activate the pineal gland? So what Dr. Joe explains in this chapter is that the breath creates internal pressure. So when we inhale and exhale, our skull in a very subtle way contracts and expands and contracts, and what's the opposite of contract? It goes in and out. There's like these little ventricles in our skull. And when we breathe in and out, it opens and expands and goes back to normal, right? And so when we do this breath, we're intentionally creating pressure in the brain, right? And that brain is what he says we're using that pressure to move the spinal fluid up the spine to the center of the brain where the pineal gland is. And he says that that is what activates the pineal gland, and it releases a very potent chemistry that supercharged melatonin that alters perception and awareness. So not only does it calm your neocortex, that analytical part of your thinking, but it sends signal throughout the body to calm down. You are safe. Just relax. All your guards are down. You are literally in the ideal state of meditation, right? You feel safe. This is your ideal state to create from. The reason we practice overcoming the body is because when you're stuck in the emotions of the past, you never feel safe. Your body's in a constant state of fight or flight. You're constantly producing stress hormones, which over time is not sustainable for a healthy environment. It's just not. This is why so many of us develop all kinds of, digestive issues, chronic pain issues. I'm not talking about people who have car accidents and, physical injuries. I'm talking about those things that seemingly come up out of the blue. Like we don't realize we probably weren't the best managers of our energy because we didn't know what to do. We didn't know what we were doing. And so we we practice the meditations, we practice the breath, we practice the framework, the formula that Dr. Joe gave us to really pull our minds out of the body long enough to condition it to something new, right? Like if you've been living in a state of constant trauma for a long time, or even just a couple of years, that's still a long time, right? Still a long time to be conditioning your body to live live on edge and not feel safe, right? Whether it's in your relationships, your circumstances, whatever stories you have from your past that you continue to bring into your present moment, your body doesn't know that you're just thinking a thought. It thinks it's actually happening. So every time you think about the things that stress you out, you're back in a state of fight or flight. And we're doing all of this to pull the mind out of the body long enough to linger in the unknown, because there in the unknown, which Dr. Joe and quantum physics tells us is the unified field, all potentials exist. Every single reality that could possibly be so exists. And the one that you're currently living is the one that you keep charging up with the number one currency that humans have, which is our attention and our focus and our awareness. So whatever is within your consciousness, that is what you keep producing from. So you practice these meditations, you pull the mind out of the body, you linger in the unknown long enough to produce a new outcome, long enough to feel a new emotion, long enough to imagine a different scenario. So when you get into that void, when you drop all of your analytical thinking and you're just lingering, now you can allow yourself to drift into creativity. Dr. Joe tells you, live that future now. That's what he says that towards the end of all of his meditations, because he wants you, now that you've overcome the body, to to give yourself room for possibility. Tune into the frequency of the version of you where that problem no longer exists. That sound familiar? That's him, right? He says it all the time. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to train our bodies to not be so married to our five senses and what's happening in the 3D reality. Well, I'm not saying it's not real. What I'm saying is that's not the only real that can exist. That's the real that exists in this present moment based on everything you've done in the past leading up to this moment. But what can happen in the future is based on what you're giving your consciousness to in this present moment. So if you're lingering in the unknown, why not tune into a potential where that problem doesn't exist, where that health condition is not a thing? Hey, Stacy. Hey, how you doing? But tune into a potential where that problem no longer exists and linger. And Dr. Joe says the longer you linger in that frequency, now you're drawing that reality, that potential to you. So now you're not having to go from matter to matter, trying to force, manipulate, control to get this outcome. Instead, just resting in fulfillment, lingering in the energy of that potential. What's the energy of that potential? Your embodiment. Who would you be if that potential were so? If your prayers were already answered, if that healing was already there, if that manifestation had already transpired, what is the frequency, the emotion that you would live in? Linger in that. And what we try so hard to do, and that comes with practice, is bringing that emotion out of our meditation and into our day to day lives. This is why I share a lot of my embodiment posts, you guys. I share the embodiment posts because I want y'all to see, or I want to talk through real life moments that I have as I practice this work. I shared my Starbucks story because of that, because I had a moment where I was feeling into lack. I was like feeling FOMO. I'm going to miss out if I don't buy this cup. It's the last one on the shelf. Do I have enough points? Can I get the barista to hold it for me in the back? Like, I'm literally fight or flight in my own way about the damn cup. But we do this with all sorts of topics. And we send our body is the first thing to take the hit emotionally, right? When we're stressed, when we're, trying to figure things out in our heads. And I talked myself off the ledge because I remember what I practiced in meditation. I brought it with me at that moment. And I said, I fear nothing because I have it all. And I just that reassurance, my body instantly calmed down. And idea came to me to just go search the internet. Boom. I found a whole bunch of cups. Some of them better priced than what was in the store. But my solution would not have come to me, and I would have been hasteful as I am when I feel lack. I would have bought it out of FOMO, just continuing a pattern of lack, not realizing it because it is unconscious. But instead of that, I chose different. And God, the divine, the unified field, the universe showed me the truth, which is I am infinite. I have abundance. There's so much abundance, so much so. Let me show you a bunch of different places that you could buy this cup. Let me show you that if you don't buy this cup in this moment, you're still going to be whole and complete. And this is what we do all of this work to heighten our awareness in the present moment so that we can be in tune with oneness. And that oneness is where we will feel into our wholeness, where we will not buy into stories of lack just because we practiced it for so long. I don't care how many generations have lived that way. Even if I did grow up that way, it stops with me. It stops with me because I am privileged enough to learn this work. It stops with you too because you're here learning this stuff, learning this work. So I'm sorry, I went on a tangent, but I didn't even go over part three. But in part three of this section, Dr. Joe just basically talks about the supercharged derivatives of melatonin and how when we do the breath and we activate that pineal gland and we allow that melatonin to come into contact with that electromagnetic field in our brains, starting in our brains, that this is where our pharmacy, internal pharmacy, gets activated. Anti-cancer, anti-aging, anti-inflammatory, and regenerative chemicals get produced through this process. And it's not an exaggeration to say that you're tuning into your own inner pharmacy. And this explains how people, again, in Dr. Joe's community, have healed from the incurable when they constantly practice this work. They see miraculous results. They go back to their doctors and their doctors are like, I don't know what you're doing, but keep it up. I don't know what happened. I've never seen that before. you know um, they're having what do you call it, instant remissions from different diseases and chronic pain. They're having manifestations that they know wouldn't have been possible had they not learned the framework of what they were actually doing. And Dr. Joe doesn't call it manifestation, he calls it dimensionalizing objects, dimensionalizing experiences. And to me, because I came into Joe by way of Neville and Abraham Hicks and other spiritual teachings, when I hear him say dimensionalizing experiences, I naturally understand him to say what Abraham means when they say tune into the vortex, what Neville Goddard means when he says imagination creates, tune into that scene, that imaginal act, that inner conversation, because what you're doing is to dimensionalize something is not just to visualize like 2D, like flat objects or flat scenes. It's to put yourself in the scene, to live it, meaning you're using all of your five senses. Neville said to give it the tones of vivid reality. That means when you're in the kitchen of your dream home, is a cup of coffee brewing? Because if it is, don't just see the cup of coffee, hear it dripping into the cup. Smell the smell of the coffee. If you're picking up the cup to drink it, feel the warmth of the coffee going down your throat, your esophagus. Hear yourself say, whatever that after you quench your thirst, like literally live it. And that is what Joe means when he says to dimensionalize an experience. And when you are practicing, when we get into part 5 of chapter 12, the pineal gland meditation, once we activate the pineal gland after the breath and we feel into that electromagnetic field, the experience of activating the pineal gland, and then we're able to drift deeper into our meditations, now we're in the alpha and theta states where we're ready to create. We're ready to dimensionalize a scene. Don't ever forget that when you get to that space in the meditation, that is your opportunity to live whatever that potential is that you would like to experience. Because if the unified field is the field of oneness and all realities, all potentials exist right now, and all you need to do is tune into it, that is your moment. That's your moment, guys. So for part 3, someone asked, why do people report psychedelic or mystical experiences after these meditations? Once again, when you are in these meditations and you do that breath, and that melatonin is not normal melatonin, it's not signaling your body to sleep, but instead it's supercharged and is sending a bunch of different derivatives of melatonin, supercharged melatonin. That's all the things I listed: anti aging, anti inflammatory, anti cancerous, and so many other things. It's also producing DMT like compounds, which I don't know if you're familiar with ayahuasca. I think I'm saying it right, but people go to spiritual masters like shamans who help them have experiences like past life regressions or to have just mystical psychedelic experiences. And they do that by using a plant medicine. And that plant medicine is called ayahuasca, or one of many. One of them is called ayahuasca, and it has DMT compounds in it. And that is released naturally when you're doing the breath and this pineal gland activation. So it's similar to the effects of ayahuasca and psychedelics, okay? Except you don't need the substance. That's what we're doing. This is what the Dr. Joseph Dispenza is teaching his fellow humans, his fellow brethren and sisterin, how to work with your body. And again, he's not teaching anything new under the sun. All he's doing is bringing the science. And this is so important because this science, it does not matter your religious background. It does not matter what your faith is. We do not ignore science. It's why we trust our doctors and we don't ask our doctors, hey, are you Muslim or Christian when they work on us? No, because we all have a body. We all have biology. We all have experienced chemistry. So I appreciate Joe, and I think he's going to win a Nobel Peace Prize, especially when he has enough of this research and journals published and gathered so that the scientific world could stop acting like he's not really him, because he's really him, right? Like I've explained in a few of my other lives that I'm very fortunate that I grew up Christian Baptist, but not by force. My mother was Christian. My grandmother kept me to church. My grandmother was Christian Baptist. My mother was more non denominational. She believed more in Christian science. So we were open to things like law of attraction very early on in my life, right? And then from there, my oldest brother, he would read other spiritual books like the Quran, even though he grew up, with a Christian background like me. He would read the Kabbalah. He would read, things into Scientology. And like we've just been really expansive. And what I recognize, and I'm very grateful for that, because immediately when I read and heard Dr. Joe speak about these topics from a scientific standpoint, it resonated with me because no matter what religion or faith I was reading about, I understood these teachings to be universal. And I also respected him a lot more that he did not use certain phrases. Like instead of calling the energy centers chakras, he calls them energy centers. And I respect that because he understands that religion divides. If a Christian hears you talking about chakras, they're going to turn the TV off. They're going to tune out because their faith teaches them that that's foolishness. That's what they learn. And vice versa. When a Muslim hears about, what do you call it, communion, where Christians might, do certain rituals, they're not tuned into that stuff. It divides them. So I respect Joe because he understands that enough to say, I'm not going to use the language that divides, but I'm going to teach people these different teachings from different ancient spiritual practices because our ancestors knew better than us. They knew. And somehow, some way, we got away from tradition because of moving to different regions and all the things that happened in history. Human history is crazy. But he understood to bring it all back here, but give it to people in a way that, regardless of their religion, they can receive it. So if I call it something by a scientific term, like energy centers rather than chakras, more people are going to be more open to it. And more people are going to understand that if I have these body parts, then I have a human body, then these things exist in my body. Rather than saying, I'm not going to listen to him because I don't know what that is. That might be demonic. Like that's what religion does. So Went on another tangent, but someone else did ask, can this process happen overnight? And I'm thinking they're talking about being able to activate your pineal gland and have like a mystical experience. I'm going to assume that's what they're talking about. But I would just say, like anything else, it's a practice. I personally have practiced the pineal gland meditation, but I've practiced it in a few of Dr. Joe's other meditations, one specifically called Reconditioning the Body to a New Mind. That meditation, in the beginning, he practices the breath. And I think he does that before you even get introduced to the pineal gland teachings, because he's trying to prime you for being able to understand what you've been doing. And I do also appreciate his teaching style. As a former educator in public schools, I do appreciate his teaching style of repetition, because it is so true. That is how we learn. You can get the same information in 20 different ways, and it's the repetition, no matter which angle you hit, that gets you to fully understand it. And what Dr. Joe says is, if you can explain it, then you know it. Right? And knowledge is the precursor to the experience. So, Dr. Joe's data shows that beginners can actually start experiencing changes very quickly. So, when you're asking, can it happen overnight? Anything is possible. And the reason that beginners can experience it is because they don't have as much resistance, right? Like they may not have as many hangups as somebody who might have learned meditation a different kind of way. And so now, having to learn Joe's way, they might resist or they might question certain things. Whereas a beginner is like an open book. They're like, I don't know, teach me. So, when they have intention and they're very consistent, they can experience it quicker than some people who have been doing it for a long time. And I would say that I've been practicing Dr. Joe's meditations now for about 4 or 5 years. I think 2019 was my first introduction to him. And I have not had any mystical experiences, but I will say that I've been practicing the meditation. And right before this live, I actually practiced the reconditioning the body to a new mind meditation. And it was really beautiful. And I've had what happened in this meditation happen multiple times before. But what I understood in my body, not just my mind, was how the breath that we practice is meant to create that inductance field, especially since I've been reading this book again. So the inductance field, which is like a our own electromagnetic field around us, and you can literally feel this, guys. Like when I did the breath and I drifted into meditation right after, I was sensing, because he tells you to sense the energy in space around you in space, and I could feel the pulsation of the energy all around me. And I visualized the spinal fluid going up my spine and into my brain, up the prana tube, which is what the ancient mystics called it. And I visualized it hitting the pineal gland and generating what that piezoelectric magnetic charge that he talks about in I think it's part two. But what struck me was how relaxed I was, how grounded I was, and how elevated that I felt at the same time. And I was present and I was aware, but I was totally free from the noise, because there was definitely noise in my background. But I felt so safe in this meditation that I didn't flinch. I didn't have to open my eyes and see where it was coming from. I just felt safe. And Dr. Joe invites you in this meditation to embody different emotions, elevated emotions. So, gratitude, inspiration, and courage. And I could feel each of those without resistance. Like my mind wasn't questioning, like, what does he mean? What does courage feel like? Like I literally was able to go into a scene, dimensionalize a scene where I saw myself or felt into myself being courageous. And that's what this work does over time. You move beyond the body's programming, beyond the past emotions that are stuck in the lower survival centers, centers one, two, and three, where most of your emotions and energy get stuck when you've learned to live in survival, right? You move beyond that programming and into who you actually are. And you are pure consciousness. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. And if you remove the human experience, you are just a spiritual being. That means you don't have the problems that the human has. You don't have the emotions, you don't have the connections and the meanings that your human self has. You are completely free, you are completely oneness, you feel whole and complete already. Why? Because you don't have the problems of your human self when you are being your true spirit. Detachment, exactly, B77. Welcome back, by the way. I'm so glad you joined me tonight, B7. But that's actually what we're practicing. And it doesn't, like I said, I've been doing the meditations for a while now, and every meditation is different. I literally heard some content creators that are avid goers of Dr. Joe's 7-day retreats, and they created a channel together as a couple. But I heard them talk about like how sometimes you'll have an experience or you'll manifest something or materialize or dimensionalize something from the meditation. And then when it happens that one time, now you find yourself chasing after that experience again. And it's the effort of you trying to make something happen that it actually doesn't happen, right? Because the divine doesn't operate from your force or your manipulation or your control. It operates when you are detached. As B7 said, detachment. That's that surrender. All right. Like when you pray, believe you have received and surrender. Don't grow attached to the outcome. Be open to the divine bringing it to you in a miraculous way. Because if you can predict it, then it's not a miracle. If you can predict it, then it's not from the divine. It's not the unknown. It's what you know because you've tried to control it and manipulate the narrative. But we want to get away from that way of existing because that's what keeps us in a chronic state of fight or flight, trying to control everything, because when something doesn't go the way we want it to, now our nervous system is dysregulated. Now we're trying to force something. We're trying to force outcomes. And that's not what we want. We do this meditation, we do the formula that Dr. Joe helped put together so beautifully, and so seamless. It's such a easy formula that anybody can apply. And as Dr. Joe says, the hardest part is making time to do it. Because we always tell ourselves, I'm too busy. And when you want to change, guess what the body does? It fights you for familiarity because that's what feels safe. It doesn't matter how dangerous it is, how toxic it is. Your body's job is to keep you safe. And when you are in the unknown, that doesn't feel safe. So the body's like, oh no, this is boring. I could be doing something else. And it throws the kitchen sink at you. And you start thinking about everybody that you're mad at, every circumstance that you don't like. And now you're in that chronic loop of the negative thoughts and the spiraling. And we know how this goes. And our whole purpose of showing up here, reading the book again, diving into these teachings is to overcome our limited selves, the limited aspects of ourselves, so that we can tap into the infinite of ourselves, the expansive parts of ourselves, the part of ourselves that's the truth of who we really are before the world and the circumstances that we have told us who to be. All right. And here's the thing, we're not doing this for the sake of mysticism alone. We're doing this because it changes our lives. This is how people heal. This is how people manifest the impossible. It's the union of science and spirit in real time. And as we know through history, science and spirituality were at odds. They would bump heads. The scientists thought the mystics were kooks, and vice versa. The mystics thought the scientists were trying to be God. And so now, fast forward to 2025, we're realizing that these two worlds are not opposites or enemies. They're both truth. And now is the time where they can both emerge and exist harmoniously and feed off of one another. And that's exactly what Joe Dispenza is doing. He's bringing everything that so many people have learned from different religions and spiritual practices and tradition. And he's bringing the science to help us understand what we're doing, to help us evolve our knowledge. And again, knowledge is the precursor of experience. And the more you understand what you're doing, the more intentional you can be with where you put your focus, your awareness, your consciousness and your energy. Because where your attention goes, there goes also your energy. I said a mouthful, y'all. If this is resonating, let me know in the comments. Um, but some of y'all saw that video, and again, I mentioned that about the Starbucks cup. It's the incremental changes. It's the little things. Like when I was in my reconditioning the body to a new mind meditation right before this live, Dr. Joe was inviting me to feel elevated emotions in that meditation, and I was allowing myself to dimensionalize experiences in my meditation. And what happens, and I do this often, what happens when I can really feel into a scene, when I'm in my waking day and certain instances come up, I'm able to remind myself of who I remember myself to be. Now, remember, your subconscious doesn't know the difference between something real and imagined. So the more I practice certain scenes, whether it's from my mind movie or it's in these meditations where I'm able to dimensionalize scenes, it's like me giving my subconscious a taste of an experience that I've had. So it has a now it has a new memory. So now when I go into my day-to-day life and that person who used to trigger me triggers me, I'm unconsciously, subconsciously able to remember, wait a second, I don't live there anymore. I'm not that version anymore. This won't work anymore because this doesn't need to be a thing anymore. I'm not that version. And this is what the practice does over time. It helps you to give your body a taste of something different. But the more you practice that, the more that taste of something different becomes more like a memory. Now, instead of the survival emotions being stuck in your body, now the thriving emotions can be stuck in your body, right? Now you can feel more safe, more calm. You can soothe yourself when you're feeling those moments of lack instead of doing what's familiar, instead of playing into the old man, the old conditioning, those past memories, that addiction that you have to your past. And I am just so grateful for this work, y'all. I really am. And I would not be doing this reading of this book every week. We are on chapter 12. So I've been doing this every week since the introduction, going live twice a week, which I'm super proud of myself. But again, I really just want this to be a resource for anybody who this information can help. And I really know it can help so many people. But what I want you to really understand about this work and why I show up is that it's not about just sharing the information. It's about embodying the information because the greatest way to help other people is not to tell them something. It's not to speak to them about something. It's to demonstrate. Demonstrate what we're talking about here. Demonstrate this work because the demonstration, I think they were saying that there's research that proves that even you changing your energy, your emotional state of being has measurable effects on other people as well as your environment. So just you existing more harmoniously, more coherently in your day-to-day life in your current environment, it elevates the energy in your home. It elevates the energy you have in your relationships between yourself and other people. It elevates the spaces that you enter. B7 says, what days and time do you usually do these? 6 p.m. Tuesday. And so for you, B7 is 6 p.m. For me, it's 8 p.m. Eastern. So I'm on the East Coast. So I go live 8 p.m. on Tuesday and Friday night, up at least until we finish the book. And we're on chapter 12, and there's actually 14 chapters in the book. So we don't have a whole lot more of these, but I do intend to continue the conversation and to continue the teachings. I might even read a different type of book, maybe something from Neville to bring it home and then sprinkle that with some Joe. And that's what I love about the community I'm creating here. Is that we all are kind of into the same teachers and teachings. So a lot of this is not over anyone's heads. It lines right up. And so we're just supporting one another in this evolution as we evolve our practice and evolve the information and come back to the information when we need to go back to the basics. Um, that's my purpose of showing up. But we really influence the world when we embody this work and we demonstrate, because people don't care what you say. They look at how you show up. They look at how you handle your problems. They look at how you express kindness and love. That's what people learn from. Like, if you ever pay attention to when someone dies and people speak at their funeral, people don't always remember what you say as much as they remember how you made them feel and what you demonstrated while you were here. And so that's what we're here to do. So if this resonated with you, I encourage you to go back and watch all the previous chapter replays. They're archived here on my YouTube channel, in order from intro all the way here to chapter 12. I don't just read the book, I help you apply it. I talk about embodiment, I give examples and reflections, and we have discussions. We've built a beautiful community here of people who are doing the work and who are seeing results in their day to day lives. I would say, if you have not already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and make sure you set your notifications so you don't miss when we're live and when a reading goes live, because I also upload my readings on Wednesdays and Sundays traditionally. But you'll get those notifications when I do upload a video. So if you're on TikTok, the playlist is also linked in my bio there. I will say today I had a very interesting encounter on TikTok, and it made me rethink my entire existence on that platform. But it's also the reason why I chose to do my readings here and not there, because we all know what's happening in the world. There's a lot of politics with that platform, and while I like the platform, I'm starting to see it change in certain ways, and it's just uncertain. I know they bought 90 days before the US makes a decision as to whether we'll have access, if whether they sell it to the US or not. But my future is not going to be in limbo because of it. So I'm here on YouTube. You guys know how to find me here. If it goes black over there, I'm always here. And you can find me on IG as well. Like, my link tree has all my contacts so that you'll always be able to find me, and I'll keep this thing going. So we'll be diving into parts 4 and 5. We're going to upload those by tomorrow. And then on Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, we're going to go live and talk about parts 4 and 5. And part 5 has the actual pineal gland meditation. It walks us through it, but it absolutely does get better from here. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being here, for doing this work. This is not for the faint of heart. It will test your gangster every single day. But you are amazing for choosing this path, because you were chosen. I feel like if you feel drawn to this information, it's because you're one of the ones. And this is the walk. The walk is to demonstrate. So you're not just changing your life, you're changing what's possible for the world because of your demonstration. And I thank you for it. I love you for it from the bottom of my heart. I don't even have to see your face. I feel your love. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but this is your reminder. And until next time, you got this. Bye, guys.